I got a great question from a viewer about no longer being able to tolerate her favorite foods. And so in this video, I kind of want to jump into why this can be a really tricky topic and hard to figure out, and steps you can take to improve the situation. Here we go.
T.C. Hale is not a doctor and does not claim to be a doctor or licensed in any type of medical field. Don't be an idiot and use anything heard on the show as medical advice. This information should be used for educational purposes only, and you should contact your doctor for any medical advice. Now get off me.
So it was over on our video explaining pancreatic insufficiency that Meg asked, after 2 flares of SIBO, I am now left with an inability to tolerate my favorite foods, lentils and beans. I just viewed that as a weird favorite food. I mean, those are okay, they're good, but most people have different favorite foods. That's interesting to me, Meg. But she says, I would try using high doses of the alpha galactosidase enzyme, which is one that's really good at breaking down things like beans and lentils, but still with uncomfortably high levels of bloating. It seems to me that my body has lost the ability to produce the specific enzyme needed, or I've exhausted my stores. I don't know. But I miss these foods. I have none of the other symptoms of pancreatic insufficiency, and I have been on HCl for about 9 months, which has improved my previous reflux issue, but would like to know what else I should consider or look at. So there's a lot to look at, and again, I don't know Meg, I'm not a doctor, I'm not giving Meg any medical advice here, but we can look through these clues to start getting an idea of where we should start our investigation when we're trying to correct an issue. We're like, man, that's my favorite food, and every time I eat it, my lips turn purple, or I have to lie in the bed in the fetal position and can't move for 12 hours. So we want to figure out why that is to see if we can get back to where we can eat our favorite foods. And with Meg saying that she's now using HCl for about 9 months and that she improved a previous reflux issue is a really big clue, and that's a big piece of information, because when someone's having some type of food intolerance, or where maybe they could eat a food before and now all of a sudden they couldn't, it's almost always related to some factor that has to do with an inability to break that food down into elemental nutrients. Keep in mind that your body can't do anything with beans. It can't use beans for energy or to supply any nutrients that the body needs. Those beans, or whatever food you're eating, has to be broken down into vitamins and minerals and amino acids and dietary fats that the body can actually use. So it's very common today for someone not to be making enough stomach acid, and that stomach acid is there to help us start that breakdown process. It's what helps us acidify that food so that we can start to break it down. And when someone is not making enough, they'll have acid reflux a lot. That's the most common cause for acid reflux, is a lack of stomach acid. It's not from too much stomach acid like advertisers want us to believe. There's this valve at the bottom of the esophagus called the lower esophageal sphincter that opens so food can come in, but then it's supposed to close so that when we're acidifying this food, it doesn't come back up and burn us. The problem is that valve is triggered by stomach acid. So if someone only has a little bit of stomach acid, they won't have enough to trigger that valve to close, and then the small amount of acid they have is coming back up and creating that reflux symptom. So when someone increases their stomach acid by supplementing with HCl or taking other steps to help the body make more of its own stomach acid, then it acidifies that stomach enough to trigger that valve to close. But keep in mind that, Meg says here that she had 2 flares of SIBO, and SIBO is a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And that just means that too much bad bacteria is in a place where it really shouldn't be. We shouldn't have a lot of bacteria in the small intestine. But usually that gets in the first place because someone is not making enough stomach acid. The stomach acid is not just there to help us digest the food. It's the barrier that keeps all the bad guys out. They're supposed to die in an acid bath when they come in on that food that we're eating. So when someone doesn't have enough stomach acid, they're going to come in and set up camp and thrive and do a lot of bad stuff. And one of the problems is that the waste from a lot of these types of bacteria can be very alkaline. So if Meg says she had 2 cases of SIBO, it kind of makes you wonder, well, is there still something going on there? She could be using some HCl to reduce that overgrowth, but it may not be enough to totally wipe it out. And if there's still bacteria there putting out this alkaline waste, it could be neutralizing a lot of the effort from that HCl. So if she's taking 4 or 5 HCl capsules per meal, if there's a lot of alkaline waste in the stomach, it may only be as effective as one capsule or even none, depending on how much that alkaline waste is neutralizing those acids. So she may be in a situation where she has enough HCl to trigger the valve to close and stop that reflux, but maybe it's not enough to truly break that food down the way that it should be broken down. And when the food doesn't get broken down properly, it has to break down by process of rotting and fermenting, which can take a lot longer, and that process can create a lot more gases and toxins, and those gases create a lot of pressure that push out on our intestinal tract and create that bloating sensation, that bloating problem that can really be very uncomfortable and can create a lot of symptoms beyond just the actual bloating. So in this scenario, it can be important to take steps to wipe out any bacterial overgrowth in the stomach. We'll put a link in the description below this video for our video on 4 steps to remove bad bacteria from the stomach, and that may give you some helpful insights. And with that digestive process, we also need to make sure that bile is flowing down from the gallbladder correctly to help neutralize the acids that are leaving the stomach and really help us bust that food apart into the elemental nutrients. We need both the acid side and the alkaline side of digestion working correctly in order to really be able to break that food down. So if you're not sure if your bile is flowing correctly, we'll put a link in the description below for our video on 10 signs of poor bile flow so you can dig into that a little bit. So you can see there can really be some homework when it comes to figuring out why a food is creating trouble here. It's not just, oh, take this supplement and everything's going to be great. It's almost never works like that. There's always effort that goes into figuring out what's going wrong. Now, Meg said that she was taking specific enzymes to try and help out, and sometimes when a specific food is creating trouble, it's just about not having the right enzymes, and sometimes taking a broad spectrum digestive enzyme can be enough to help out, but usually that's only going to help if a person just needs a little bit of a boost, or maybe that was all that was missing, was they just needed more of that type of enzyme. But in most cases, I find that not to be the case. I find that digestive enzymes are very important to really be able to digest our food, but it's almost never enough to fix a significant problem by itself. Other steps usually need to be taken to really correct an underlying cause. And something we need to think about when a specific type of food is giving trouble is we need to figure out, do we have a leaky gut situation? Because when there's too much bad bacteria in the intestinal tract, there's almost always also too many bad yeast, mold, fungus type organisms. Because when that front door is open, where there's not enough stomach acid there to fry all these bad guys when they're coming in, then all kinds of bad guys are coming in. Oh, everybody's here. It's a big party. Let's join this and really thrive here in this environment. So a lot of times when you have those yeast, mold, fungal type bad guys, they have the ability to kind of create some extra permeability in that intestinal lining where it really shouldn't be. When we should break down our food the right way, just the elemental nutrients should get into that bloodstream through that intestinal lining. But when there's a lot of bad guys in there, they can create this leaky gut issue where now the intestinal lining is a little bit too permeable, and too many of bad guys can get into the bloodstream, but also food that has not really been broken down correctly into these elemental nutrients can get into the bloodstream. And the thing is that, your body doesn't know what a chicken sandwich is. It doesn't view chicken sandwich as nutrients or energy. It views it as an invader if it hasn't been broken down into these elemental nutrients. So when food is not fully broken down and it gets into the bloodstream like that, the body views it as an invader, and then it creates these security files that, hey, when you see this, we need to attack it. And then every time you eat a peanut butter sandwich, your body goes to war against a peanut butter sandwich. So you can see how these food sensitivities can be created when there's a lot of these bad microorganisms in there, creating all this havoc and creating this excessive permeability that really should not be there. And when we think about, well, why do our favorite foods have to be the ones that we have a sensitivity to? And it's really the most likely to create problems because you're eating your favorite food all the time and you're increasing that chance of the wrong type of exposure to the body, where the body can view it as an invader and then want to attack it every time it comes in. And fixing leaky gut can really be some effort. You first have to wipe out the bad guys, and then you have to help make sure the body is getting all the nutrients that it needs to rebuild those structures. And we'll put a link in the description below on our video on understanding leaky gut. It gives a lot of steps on things you can do to improve that scenario if that's what's going on for you. And another thing to think about is that a person may also have like a salicylate sensitivity, which is this salicylic acid that is in a lot of foods, and it's also in a lot of products like cosmetics and fragrances and air fresheners and things like that. And some people will create a sensitivity to these specific compounds. And legumes are one of the highest foods that contain salicylic acid. So that could be a sensitivity that is going on in this scenario. And a lot of times the person just has, their body has a burden of too many of these types of compounds in the system, maybe because some of air freshener, maybe there's mold toxicity, something is elevating this in the system. So then a food comes in that's a little bit higher in that, and it can create a lot of problems for the person. And just keep in mind that with legumes, they're on that list of high probability for causing food sensitivity issues. Like if we're going to do an elimination diet, legumes are on the top of that list of things you need to remove to see if they're creating problems. And that doesn't mean that a person could never eat legumes again, but they likely need to fix these issues going on. And sometimes it can take a person 6 months or a year before they can eat a food again, but they first have to take the steps to correct the underlying causes. And one of the biggest steps is to make sure that their body is making enough stomach acid, or that they're acidifying that stomach properly so that they're shutting the front door. That's why so many people have this SIBO relapse like Meg was talking about. They take care of the SIBO, oh, it's gone, yay, and then 3 months later it's back again, wah, wah. Well, it's because they didn't close the front door. They didn't help the stomach acidify properly so that they can wipe out the bad guys when they're trying to come in on the food that we're eating. We have to close the front door. And another thing to think about when we're looking at legumes is that they can digest a little bit differently than most other foods. They seem to digest more a little bit further down the line and include a little bit more of that enzymatic activity and maybe some help from some beneficial bacteria. So those can be factors. If you have a lot of bad gut flora in there that's creating trouble, then these might have a harder time breaking down properly. And remember, with those enzymes that are really needed, and is there a deficiency there, a lot of times the enzyme production and release from the pancreas is actually triggered by stomach acid. So if that stomach acid rock is not dropping first, then that might restrict the ability to really create enough enzymes to break those down properly. So you can see there's a lot of layers here that need to be taken care of. If you don't know how to correct digestive malfunctions, we have a lot of videos on a variety of those topics, but also my book, Kick Your Fat in the Nuts, chapters 3 and 4, kind of walk you through figuring out which aspects of digestion are not working correctly and what steps are going to help you improve those issues. And the book is available on Amazon, but I'll put a link in the description below so you can get the whole thing totally for free, and then you can just jump to chapters 3 and 4 to kind of walk you through that process. And since the leaky gut can be such a big factor when we're talking about specific food intolerances, you really want to dig into that and understand that topic a little bit better. So go ahead and jump over right now and check out our video on understanding leaky gut to gain more insights in that area. I can't wait to hear about your results.